Hi, it's Corinne from My Chemical Free House. I'm going to do a little video tour of a condo and go over how I choose condos and how I analyze condos and apartments for rentals, whether it's signing a lease or an Airbnb. So the first thing I look for is whether it is a wood built or a concrete built. And in my city, if it's 6 stories or under, it's definitely wood. And if it's higher than 6 stories, sorry, it's not definitely wood, but it's more likely to be wood. It's most likely to be wood. And if it's more than 6 stories, it's certainly concrete. And I do prefer concrete. I do find it has lower off-gassing than the wood-built buildings. And it can be better for mold if the wood-built buildings are built in the rain, if the wood goes moldy before it gets covered. That can be a problem, although concrete is certainly not a mold-proof material, so there's no guarantee there, but I do prefer concrete. You can see there is a facade of brick, and sometimes that's a heritage facade, and those usually don't go above about 3 stories, and I prefer it to be above the facade if it is an old heritage facade that they've used and they've now built a new building around it or behind it rather. But I do prefer to be higher than 3 stories. Anyway, I find the air quality is better, just less pollution from the street, although never the top floor, as there's just too many roof problems I find with mold. Not necessarily, but the chances of there being a roof problem are high, I find, and so I want to avoid that. So avoid the top floor, and in a condo you won't ever really be on the slab. So although if it's those low-rise apartment buildings that are 2 or 3 stories, I would definitely not choose the ground floor. I would certainly choose the second floor if it's a really low story building. So as for off-gassing, I go as new as I can based on my chemical sensitivities. The flooring is usually the last thing to off-gas, but it's difficult to tell if you're looking at photos of Airbnbs how strong that's going to be, because it's either laminate, engineered, or vinyl plank, and it depends on the brand. It depends on if it's glued down or floating. You can't really tell how strong it's going to be. There's definitely a variety of flooring options there, but they are getting better, I find. So newer buildings might even be better than one that's a little older, so, or it might be very similar. The kitchen does have some off-gassing in the cabinets. I can pick up only when I'm really quite close to them. I don't find that's the biggest factor. So the other two concerns for MCS that I have are dryer vents, and it's typical here not to vent the dryer vents to the side. They vent to the roof, and almost all the buildings I've seen here are non-smoking, inside out, not allowed on the balconies, not allowed inside your own suite, even if you're the owner. So that really helps a lot for those of us who are sensitive to smoke and fragrance from laundry. So the next thing I'm going to look at when I'm looking at pictures or when I'm going to look at a place is what kind of HVAC system there is. It's really typical here to have baseboards and no AC, which is absolutely perfect for me and for this climate where you don't need AC. We don't have hot, humid weather. So that works really great here, although that's not typical in the US, and that's definitely not typical in hot and humid places. So the other part I'll look at is the ventilation system. What kind of ventilation does it have? This is a passive air intake. You can close it. It's got a little bit of filter, so it's filtering the air slightly, but as you might be able to hear, I have the window open, as I prefer to have fresh air coming in as much as possible. And the reason for the fresh air intakes, there's one here that's a very short tube going right straight through that wall to the outside. That shouldn't be a big problem, especially because it's very new, building's under a year old. But there's another one going all the way through this ceiling to that bedroom, which is behind that wall, and I don't love that as much, especially in an older building where that might not be getting cleaned out. But you can turn that off. I mean, you can close that again in the bedroom, and you can use the window for ventilation, depending on your outside humidity and temperature. So the reason for those vents, the air intake vents, is because The bathroom always has negative pressure going. So you're gonna find a vent, usually, you should, in a condo or an apartment. This one can't be turned off, and I'm finding that to be pretty typical. So that's always creating negative pressure. So it's always gonna be pulling air in. That's always gonna be pulling air out, and so there's always gonna be air coming in, and sometimes it's coming in, sometimes there's positive pressure in the hallway and it's coming in under the doors. And if there isn't some kind of way for air to come in, it's going to come in through the places you don't want it to, like the dryer vents and any other little cracks and crevices coming from your neighbors and coming from places you don't want it to. So over the over the stove, you can check if the exhaust vents to the outside by opening the cabinets and seeing if there's a vent going up. And if it does vent to the outside, that's another area of negative pressure. That means they're going to be pulling in air from all sorts of places to make up air, and you want the best air coming in that you can have. So for me, if I need to reduce the off-gassing, or if it's just a little bit something off with mold, I will bring in as much air as I can by opening the windows, turning up the heat, and using the fan over the stove. So I don't love that noise, but if I need to draw in more air and try and overturn the air, replace the air, then I will put the fan on over the stove just to bring in more air through the window. All right, so those are the main things that I'm looking for when I'm looking at condos to rent, or whether it's long-term or Airbnb. And I was going to do another split screen with a concrete building, but it really kind of looks the same, although there's different HVAC systems, so you have to analyze the HVAC system and see if that's going to work for you, where your intake air is coming from, and if it's prone to mold. If it's central AC, I don't love that. I would really want to go very new in terms of mold, and it could last a few years depending on how it's built, but central AC is always more difficult for me. In fact, any type of AC is difficult for people with extreme mold sensitivity. However, in a hot and humid climate, you need AC to bring down the humidity. And concrete in high humidity with no AC just does not work in my experience. I'm traveling to lots of places all over the world, and concrete without AC and humidity control is just a big failure. So in that sense, you do need AC, and you do need to go as new as you can. In a hot and humid climate, you may find tile flooring, and that could help a lot. Tile flooring in a concrete building, it may get you into a newer building in terms of your MCS and what you can tolerate. So hopefully that is of some help, and bye for now.